100, aka Bryant. You guys may also know me as the HDR King of Chicago, and I got a great photographer with me here today. He go by the name of Kevin Rice. He's down in West Virginia, and today's interview is just going to be a little bit about Kevin Rice and what it's like being a photographer down in West Virginia, and some of the things that he liked to do and some of the things that he went through as far as being a photographer on up from a little boy on up to the stage where he's at now. So I'm going to switch this on over to my buddy here, and we're going to get to know a little bit about yourself, Mr. Rice. So I guess you can just start by just basically telling us what it's like as far as being a photographer down in West Virginia and, shooting landscape photography.
Oh, man, you can't pick a better state, prettier state, in my opinion, to do landscape photography. Nature photography, wildlife photography. This state has it all.
I have some questions for you today that I'm pretty sure a lot of photographers on Facebook and maybe on YouTube would like to ask you. So pretty much we're going to let them ask you, but it's going to be through me. So I have 11 questions for you today. And I guess starting with the first question, that is, would you recommend that a person use a tripod while shooting landscape photography? And why? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. That's all I use. I use tripod ritually when I do landscapes. Especially when you're going to do anything where you need a slow shutter speed, like running water show. You've seen waterfall shots and that creamy, milky water. You have to have a tripod. You can't shoot things like that handheld.
Okay.
Not that you can't shoot landscapes handheld. If you've got enough light outside.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of times you're going to be in shade, shadow, especially right here in the mountains. I mean, you get down in the valleys and stuff. You got shade on one side, sun on the other. But if you really want that sharpness in your picture, yeah, you need a tripod. Heavy duty one, not one of them little cheapy little things. Are not going to cut it. If the wind blows just the slightest bit,
okay,
there goes your camera. There goes your camera.
So it's always 100% tripod when you're shooting landscape photography.
I do, yes.
Okay, that's cool. I guess we can move on to the second question. The second question is, what type of skills would a person need in order to become a landscape photographer?
Oh, geez. Know your camera. Learn your camera. Learn it well, every button, knob, adjusting your settings, everything. That's the one thing. Second thing I would consider, learn the light. Learn where the sun is coming, where it's positioned. When you compose your shot, look to where the sun is at. And have an eye for your composition, what you want to shoot. That might take a little time, but not really a whole lot. It's more learning the light, I think, is the biggest thing in landscape photography. Just like a portrait photographer, knowing his flashes, how you move them, where you move them, how much light to use, how much not to use.
Okay. That's some good info for you right there. I hope you guys are paying attention. This will help you out a lot the next time you're out there and you're shooting your landscape photography. So we're going to move on down to the third question. And the third question is, what is it like being a landscape photographer? Like up here in Chicago, I shoot a lot of buildings. So I would have to say, as far as what it's like being a landscape photographer, what is the most difficult task that you ever came across while you was out there in the field and you're shooting that nice waterfall? Like up here in Chicago, I have to worry about a lot of people when I'm shooting my buildings and, and stuff like that. So what are some of the problems that you may come across when you're out there shooting your landscape?
Maybe a bear. That's about the only bad thing I think you can come across out in the woods is a bear. Or maybe some coyotes or something that might run around. But other than that, no, I think I'd rather shoot wildlife out in the woods than I would in the city. I feel more safer in the woods out in the city.
Yeah, you got to come on down to Chicago and try it out.
Yeah, you can come up here too.
Yeah, you're right. I guess we're going to go to number 4. Number 4 is I have for you, when you're shooting your landscape photography, what is more important, your ISO or your shutter speed?
Shutter speed. ISO, if you're on a tripod, you don't have to worry. You can shoot the lowest ISO you can, so you have nothing to worry about.
Okay.
Shutter speed, actually, you're on a tripod, neither really, because your camera's going to be steady.
Okay.
It's when you're hand holding is when those will be becoming important.
Great, that's good to know. Number 5, what are your settings when you out there shooting your landscape photography?
Okay, depending on what I'm shooting. If I'm shooting like a grand landscape, where I'm gonna like I'll show you some of the pictures at the end of our interview
Okay.
here to give you an example. But what if you're wanting the grand scale of an area of a mountainside or something like that? I usually go with about between an f16 and f22. I always shoot in aperture mode and let the camera control the shutter. So if I set the aperture for between 16 to 22, you're going to get sharper images, and you're going to get, of course, if you know anything about aperture, the bigger the number, the smaller the hole. So you're going to have a
Right.
greater depth of field, so everything's going to become in focus.
Yeah. A more wider shot.
Right. So you let the camera do that much. Set the shutter speed, on a tripod, and you're good to go. Your ISO, you just keep it as low as possible, and it's pretty simple.
Okay. All right. We're gonna move on down in the questions here, and for the next question I have is number 6. What kind of camera do you use?
I have two, but my main camera I use is a Canon 7D, and I got a Canon Rebel XS. And I think from the interview you had with Fabian, I think he had the same two
Yeah.
cameras that he used. I
Yeah.
started out with when I moved up from the smaller, older digital cameras to an SLR.
Okay.
The XS was my first one.
You mind showing your cameras to the viewers that
Yeah,
don't
sure.
use Canon?
Right. Right here's this is the Rebel XS, which you can see I already have. This is the kit lens, which is an 18 to 55, which is pretty much my landscape lens.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of lenses like Fabian and a lot of people because I just don't. I mean, I would love a better lens for landscape, but I get by with this. I mean, you've seen my shots, so they're good enough.
All right.
And my bigger 70, which I keep a 50 millimeter on it, and then I usually I'll put the wide angle lens on it when I'm doing landscapes with this. And I also have a 55 to 250 that I use
Okay.
for mostly my portraits along with the 50 millimeter.
So you just pretty much take both of them out there when you're shooting, just in case you might
Yeah.
have to switch it up.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have to keep switching the lens so much because even though I do landscapes, with a wide angle lens, when you're going to capture the whole scene and everything, there's times when I see something close up, or the detail stuff in the woods. There might
Right.
be moss in the rock or things like that. You don't need to use a wide angle lens for that. You just
Yeah, that's true.
flip on the 50 millimeter or the 22, 55 to 250, and zoom in. Yeah, but of course your apertures and things change when you do things like that.
Okay. That's great. We're gonna move on down to the next question, number 7, and that's how long exactly have you been a photographer yourself?
I'd say a little over 10 years now.
Wow.
I've been actually doing, you know, I started probably back in 2000 maybe. We had a 2 megapixel cameras were like a big deal back then,
Yeah.
but you really couldn't do a whole lot like adjusting apertures and all that. So it was just like a point and shoot.
Yeah.
That's when, after several years, that's when I went to the XS, and then after I had the XS for about 3 years, I kind of got to the limitations of that camera. Since it's only a 1600 ISO rating, I come to find out, well, man, I'd like to have another camera that shoots a higher ISO if I'm in
Right.
lower conditions. That's when I went to the 7D, but I keep the XS for backup.
Yeah, I know. I remember a conversation we was just having not too long ago where we was talking about, well, actually the PCs that came out back in the day versus with the hard drives and the space that we have now on them. Back then
Uh-huh.
you was happy if you got like 256 megabytes, and now today what 256 megabytes is like what, maybe like a good 60, 70 songs, a
Oh
little bit
yeah.
more than that. Oh
And then it
wow.
went to 512, and you're like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm really getting somewhere.
Now we're talking about terabytes and gigabytes and everything. Technology has brought us a long way. So we're going to move on down to the next question. And the next question I have for you is number 8. And that is, exactly how did you get into photography?
It's something I've always been interested in when I was younger. I didn't do a whole lot of it when I was younger. Unlike my brother, my youngest brother, he's a professional in down there in Kansas City,
Okay.
and he's more in the portrait line of shooting models and things like that. Um, Me, I like all aspects of photography, from portraits, landscapes, um, nature, wildlife. I like doing it all. I don't have one niche that I like to do. Even though you all see a lot more of my landscapes than I
Right.
do anything, I
Yeah.
just I don't have any of the hot model stuff around here that I could actually want to get shot at. So
Well, if I can, I'll get out and shoot a model here and there. But my main thing is my buildings. I love my buildings.
I love your HDR shots in Chicago, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Likewise.
Phenomenal freaking work.
So, the next question is number 9, and this is a question that I get asked a lot myself, and I know a ton of people on Facebook probably ask you, and that is, what type of software do you use to edit your photos with?
Definitely. When I do HDR work, I use Photomatics. I use Lightroom 4, which I've not upgraded to 5, and Photoshop, and whatever plugins. I got a few plugins in Photoshop that I use, but those are the three main ones that I use.
Okay. Well, I actually got another question for you that's not on my notes, but I just want to put this out there because a lot of people seem to think that when you do HDR photography, it's always best to start out with a preset versus creating your own HDR and just starting at that point and just tweaking it a little bit as far as with the settings inside the application that you're using. Would you basically say that you do the same thing, or do you recommend that a person start out with a preset?
I'd say you start with the preset. I mean, I normally don't, because I've messed around with Photomatics for some time now, that I know basically where I'm going to start at when I bring it into Photomatics. But if someone who's starting out, yeah, check the presets out and then tweak your pictures from there. From a preset. If you see a preset that you kind of like, then take it from there and just kind of tweak it, because HDR pictures are always going to need tweaks.
Right. I also
And
like to
even,
save a lot of my presets as well.
yeah, I've got a few I've created on my own, that, especially for landscapes. If I do a lot of, because I do a lot of HDR landscapes too,
Okay.
and so I got a preset pretty much for my landscape stuff that I use primarily.
That's pretty sweet. Okay, number 10. The next question I have for you is, what are your thoughts on HDR as far as just for landscape photography versus like what I do up here in Chicago? You got different types of HDR. Some people don't recommend that you do it on humans. I also seen a video where Scott Kilby, I believe, said that he wouldn't use it on humans. But then you had RC Concepcion that did a couple of shots that was done in HDR on humans. And me, myself, I think HDR photography can pretty much be for any type of photography. It's all about your style and how you do it. So, what are your thoughts on that as far as just HDR photography on landscape versus city?
I agree with you. It can be used on just about anything. When the lighting is, it all depends on your lighting when you do HDR. There's times when I do my landscapes where I look at the scene the way this, like I said, like the way the lighting is.
Right.
I don't need HDR all the time on some of my landscape shots. But if I'm in a predicament where I've got a lot of shade, a lot of light, things like this, that's you want to get the details and the shadows. You're going to have to use HDR.
Right.
And I'm sure it's the same thing with buildings and cityscapes. You're going to have buildings shading different parts. You're going to, you want to bring detail in the shading your dark areas and then your lighter areas. That's when you want to use HDR.
Yes, that is
But
true.
yeah, I agree. It could be used on anything, even on people. One of my favorite photographers and editors, I would say, was Joel Grimes. He has a gritty look to his look, but yet his look sort of looks kind of HDR to his portraits, but
Yeah.
it's not really HDR. But the look he gives them is like the look that I've seen that you've got of your people when you shoot them, when you do your HDR work.
He highlights his images a lot.
Right.
He uses a lot of highlight as far as like for different areas of the photo that I notice when he do his humans. He's an awesome photographer. I must say that. I am a fan of his work.
Yeah.
Number 11. This is the last question I have for you, and that is, what would be a great lens for the type of photography that you do?
A wide angle lens. Um, the lens that I'm really looking at, I would like to have is I think it's a Tamron. I like something between like a 16 to 28. millimeter lens, somewhere down in that range. You don't need to really go. I think Canon makes a 10 to 22, which is really super wide lens.
Yeah.
That would be great for, let's say, a home interior photographer. When you want to get the whole room,
Right.
that'd be a good lens for that. But when you're doing landscapes, 16 to 18, you know, and the range like 16, 18, 20 by 28, or I think Nikon makes a 14 to 24. Somewhere in that range
Okay.
is good for landscape. I'm not into the fisheye stuff, so I'm not a
Yeah.
fisheye lens person. I just don't like the distortion look of a
Yeah.
fisheye lens.
I use the fisheye sometimes depending on what I'm doing. If I'm out and I'm doing a shot of a vehicle or car, and I may want the eyes on the front of the car to pop out at you, I may use a little bit of the fisheye effect.
Yeah,
So
it's more of a novelty lens in my opinion,
yeah,
and something that you're going to use every day.
yeah. So that's great, man. Other than that, you have any websites? Some of the people here that's viewing this video here can check you out.
Go to Flickr or Facebook.com/KR Gallery Series.
Okay, I'll be
You
sure to put the links down below in the description.
go to my Flickr, which is flickr.com/KevinLR.
Okay,
And Google Plus, just look me up on Google Plus and add me to your group and look me up. And have anybody come into our hangouts with us and talk photography with them.
great. I'm your man, HDR King of Chicago, and this is a good friend of mine by the name of Kevin Rice. So you guys can look him up on the links that he just told you about, and that will be down below in this description. As you know, you can find me on YouTube, and I'm gonna try to throw up some more videos as far as different interviews with different photographers, just basically around the world. And I have some more photographers that I'm looking at, or should I say looking into. They probably don't know it, but Charmaine, I'm coming for you, and I'm coming for you also, Teresa Rigger. So I hope they're ready for their interview. And it's just to get people, basically to get the thoughts on photography from different photographers, like I said, around the world, because everybody is different. We all shoot different. We all use different types of cameras. We all use different software. So with that being said, it's just to basically gather all that information and squash it in one box and use it how you would use it on your photography. So this is your man, Big B Productions 100, the HDR King of Chicago. Holla at you.